Thank you for listening to Fate Weaver, written by Elias T. Least. If you enjoy this novel, consider donating $1 through Cash App to $EliasLeast. And now, Fate Weaver. Chapter 24. Alone in the Dark. Cyrus examined his statistical display. He needed more privacy, and he required time to research his next attribute distribution. He knew that he had another point, and although he severely missed an opportunity at his last advancement, the extra point in Constitution had come in very useful while sparring with the colossal Jarl. The arcane letters that left him amazed every time he saw them showed his basic information. His name was Cyrus, he was 16 years old, and he was classified as a Temporal Warrior. He had advanced to level 4 and was quite proud of that. With another level came the power of his wondrous crescent blade. This time, it had improved his charisma. This had brought him to an ability score of 11 in everything. He was officially better than the average human in every aspect. This made him happy. He still thought that intelligence was the way to go, but since he was now content with his last misstep, he wasn't sure if that was the best route at this point. As long as there were no women and hard wine in his immediate future, he felt as if he would make a better choice this time around. Cyrus was aware that the caravan would take quite a while to get over the recent attack, and the sun had closed its eye. Darkness was upon them fully. He could see the fires being lit, so he knew that he was safe, but he was far enough out of earshot that he could have a decent conversation with Queen. Queen responds, "Greetings, user Cyrus. You have bonus items waiting to be claimed for completing an optional secondary quest. Would you like to claim the items?" Cyrus was delighted. He truly did love getting gifts, and the last one was an amazing crescent moon knife that was deadly sharp and a serious stat booster. He also received a belt that held the knife and a small pouch with coins that he hadn't really needed, but you never know. It's always good to have coin. Cyrus replied to Queen, "Indeed, I would, Queen. Thank you very much." It was almost too dark to see, but he could tell that the ground in front of him was moving as the nanoparticles were reforming the materials and creating something else. This was a fascinating process to watch, and Cyrus wished there was more light to see. Cyrus reached down and felt that there were two distinctly different items that he had been gifted. One he was very familiar with, and his heart skipped a beat as the implications of what he was holding crossed his mind. It was another crescent moon knife. If this one was twin to the other, then having it on his person would bring him much higher on the food chain of abilities. He lifted it high so that he could see a reflection of the faraway firelight off of its gleaming steel, then pulled the other out of his belt. They were identical, and they felt amazingly balanced. He had never seen anyone fight with two daggers at once, but he had heard stories about such forms. He would ask Jarl. One thing was certain. The blade lifted his abilities the same as the other. As soon as he picked it up, he could feel a difference in his physical prowess and his mental awareness. He now knew which ability score to increase that would help him accomplish his immediate goals. Queen, place my level 4 ability point in Charisma. Queen responds, "This is a very intuitive choice, user Cyrus. Please relax while I make the adjustments. This will only take a few minutes." Cyrus remained in the lotus position and thought about how he would convince Miranda to teach him her mystic arts. The more charisma he could muster, then the easier it will be to convince her to teach him. He didn't think he had the experience to come at it from a sexual angle. She was a strikingly beautiful woman, but his past was limited to a drunken night in the mating tent just under a month ago. Perhaps as her personal guard she could see it as somewhat of an advantage. A stronger protector would only increase her safety. So that was an avenue of thought. Having the boost in his wisdom score from the second knife made a huge difference in his thinking process. He hungered for more. What could he become as he advanced farther into this system? He had already become so much more than he was, a small village boy that thought the gods looked down on him from the sun in the sky. Now he controls the nanoparticles that make up the world. And that is just the beginning of his journey. Queen responds, "Advancement complete." Cyrus opened his eyes, but it was still too dark to see the other item. He put his crescent knives away, one on each side of his belt. He knew that they looked as lethal as they felt, and was quite happy with his armament. "What is this other thing, Queen? It has a strap on it." Queen responds, "They are the spectacles of the Time Warrior. They are worn on your eyes and have a slight boosting ability of your manipulations of time and space, among other slight advancements." Cyrus liked the sound of that as he figured out how to put them on. They were round with a soft fur-like substance that pressed against his face. There were no spaces between high skin and the form of the spectacles. They seemed to be made specifically to fit his face. Once he had them on properly, he couldn't even tell they were on, except for the fact that they lit up the area as if he had a torch with him. He could see in the dark, and that was amazing on its own, but he also noticed that there was a distinct difference in his foresight. The visions of his future self were well ahead of where he was. He had to concentrate on how long it took him to catch up to himself, and it was at least 6 seconds. This is going to be a complete change as to how he deals with the world. He already had a problem answering people before they asked questions, and greeting was a disaster. Now it will be even more difficult to interact, but the benefits are going to be outrageous. He was truly excited, and hoped that another raid party of minks would hit them tomorrow. Oh, sparring with Jarl is going to be great. The addition of his twin blade had made an incredible change to his abilities. While his constitution and intelligence remained at 11, both his strength and dexterity had went to 12 along with his wisdom. His charisma, however, had advanced to a 13. He could physically feel a difference in the way he saw himself, and knew that the way others would see him had changed as well. Chapter 25. Love is Love. The next few days involved several meetings between Miranda and the other 2 leaders of the caravan. Cyrus tried not to speak as much as possible. It was more difficult than he thought to become used to the extended vision of foresight. It was to the point where he considered disabling it, but he knew that he had to master this power if he were going to go as far as he could with it. His new spectacle, although astoundingly useful when he used his ability, brought too much attention to himself. He didn't know what he looked like when he wore them, but it must be very odd. He had placed them for the moment in his dimensional storage. He knew they would be quickly available if he needed them. He had completed his daily quests with Queen by sparring with Jarl each morning. It was the first thing they did after the morning stretches that Jarl had taught him. The dark-skinned warrior had given up on trying to land a blow on his small companion, and they now concentrated on Cyrus's basic technique, something that he was sorely lacking. Besides stretching, he was learning a lot about hand-to-hand combat, and he had found that dual-wielding suited him very well. Jarl had explained that with his size, it was incredibly effective. The warrior had witnessed his uncanny ability to cut through enemy lines and wreak havoc during the minx battle, and the devastation that was caused by one of these blades was a thing of nightmares. Now he had 2. Jarl had examined the knives that Cyrus used, and did not seem affected by the incredible boosts that they afforded him. He was standing outside the largest covered wagon in the caravan, the central section leader that seemed to oversee the entire convoy. Mistress Miranda had been in there for an hour, and it was Cyrus's job to wait outside with the 2 other personal guards. He felt slightly out of place amongst the 2 hulking fighters that were responsible for the safety of the caravan commanders. Jarl would fit in here much better. He would still be considered small, but at least these men wouldn't be trying to intimidate him with bulging muscles and piercing death gazes. Cyrus knew that he could easily defeat either or both men, thanks to the abilities unlocked by the control system, so he was not intimidated in the least, and found their entire presence laughable. He simply stood outside the large wagon, looking like a small 16-year-old kid that was just enjoying a nice day. "Did you kill that puppy you wear, boy?" the first man asked, his finger pointing to the pelt around Cyrus's shoulder. Cyrus was dumbfounded at the man's huge finger. It was the size of 3 of his own. He didn't appreciate the reference to his ancestors' war garb. How does a finger have bulging muscles? Cyrus thought. Are there finger workouts that someone could do that would strengthen those digits? I would bet this man could crush a normal-sized person's skull with one hand, and without hardly any effort at all. He looked up and met the man's eyes and shrugged. No, it was a family heirloom. The other man, slightly bigger than the first, looked over and asked, "What's an heirloom?" The first man said, "That means his daddy gave it to him." And they both laughed like it was the funniest thing they had heard in a while. Their laughter, however, had an edge to it that Cyrus was quite sure held more contempt than humor. Cyrus smiled his best innocent smile and asked, "Are you two fellas related?" They stopped laughing and looked at each other. Neither of them looked anything like the other. Both shook their heads, and the first said, "No, not at all." Cyrus continued to smile innocently. "Oh, you both seem so close, so very familiar with each other. The way you laugh together and the twinkle in your eyes when you have some shared personal insight. I just thought either you were brothers or—" The first man just looked in confusion, but the second man's eyebrows raised in obvious offense. "Or what?" The second man's hand went to the well-worn pommel of the bastard sword that was sheathed at his side. Cyrus spread his hands, palms up. "Well, The door to the wagon opened at that moment, and the three leaders of the caravan stepped out, and could clearly see the two men in an odd confrontation with the little boy in front of them that looked as if he were trying to explain something but couldn't find the words. The obese man that seemed to have authority over the others spoke up at the sight. "What is about here? Clang, are you about to draw your weapon on this young lad?" Clang did not take his hand off the sword as he kept his gaze locked on the tiny boy compared to himself. "Let this boy finish his words, sire." He spoke slowly and maliciously. All eyes turned to Cyrus, who stood with that simplistic smile on his face as a chime rang through his mind. That sound made his voice have slight laughter to it, because this is exactly what he was expecting. Queen responds, "User Cyrus, there is a human in the area with vicious intent. A battle quest is now available for you to undertake. You have the option to neutralize additional enemies for bonus rewards. Do you accept the quest?" Cyrus nodded his head and mumbled something that no one could quite understand, and then cleared his throat. "I was just saying that love is love, and if these two men wish to experience it among themselves, then I say they should be able to express that feeling in any way they wish." The larger of the two large men, Clang, pulled his giant bastard sword out of its sheath, and Cyrus was surprised to see that it was longer than he was tall. This was the largest sword that he had ever seen. He thought of Jarl's scimitar, and it seemed minuscule in comparison. The smaller of the two large men, which was still at least 3 times the size of Cyrus, finally realized that his sexuality was in question, and, with a curse, also began to pull his weapons. The obese leader of the caravan yelled, "Stop this ignorance, boy! Are you trying to get yourself killed? These men are going to cut you to pieces if you keep up this line of speech." Cyrus looked at the group as if they didn't understand what he was trying to say. "Sir, I am simply saying that we should not hold our own beliefs above the desires and the needs of others. If these two men wish to share their lives together, then who are we to say otherwise? Personally, I enjoy the soft embrace of a woman, but that is simply the way I choose to live my—" Both large men had their weapons drawn and took a step forward, so Cyrus decided to end his little charade. He had his foresight sent as far ahead as he could send it, but he was not wearing his Time Warrior spectacles, so he had a maximum of 3 seconds currently. The leader of the front of the caravan stepped forward, his hands raised to stop the obvious bloodshed that was about to take place. "Service Clang, this village boy has not spent time among us. Surely you can overlook this misunderstanding." Service, the first to speak with Cyrus about his ancestors' wolf pelt, spoke up. "Lord Tylan, we cannot. This boy has questioned our honor and our dignity. He must be made to recognize this indecency. There will be blood for his words." Lord Tylan turned to the beautiful figure of Miranda. "Mistress Miranda, what say you to this situation?" Miranda looked to the two large men, and then to Cyrus, then to Tylan. "Tread carefully, Lord Tylan. If it comes to blows, my man will kill both of these men." Cyrus looked to Miranda and gave her an appreciative nod. She returned his gaze in all seriousness. Both Tylan and the obese man raised their eyes at this, obviously seeing a major opportunity here. Tylan was the first to state what both were thinking. "Do I hear a wager in your words? Lord Marcus, did you hear a wager in the words of Mistress Miranda?" Chapter 26. A Small Business Wager. The rotund leader, Lord Marcus, nodded his head, thick blubber on his throat shaking with his excitement. Yes, I do. What a wonderful day we could make of this. The caravan is almost halfway to the Golden City, and we could have with a rest perhaps on the morrow. How exciting. We shall stop at midday and set up a feast for the entire caravan. Now what shall we wager? Mistress Miranda spoke up. "Since you are both so sure of your two largest prize fighters here, I will take your two largest wagons, each. And gentlemen, I know your manifests, so don't think about emptying the cargo or trying to swindle anything out of them." Lord Marcus, eyes wide with that grand ask, stated, "The question of how you know my manifest would be the first thing that comes to mind. But if that is true, then you know this is no trivial matter. I do not believe you have anything to equal the value of what you ask." Lord Tylan broke in the conversation. "I do not have a problem with this wager, and looking at your man that you plan to put into this fight, I just cannot imagine what you have up your sleeves. Regardless, I will take your bet, but in return, I have one simple wish." Lord Tylan smiled. "You will share my bed, willingly and enthusiastically." Mistress Miranda took a deep breath and gave Cyrus a long look as if examining the value of a horse that she planned to buy. Cyrus just stood there, nonchalantly rocking back and forth from heel to toe in his crumbling, dusty boots. He really did look like a pathetic village boy, but Miranda had seen him spar with Jarl, and she had seen him in true action with the minx. But most of all, she could feel the power emanating from him, and knew that he had the ability. Not like her, but something similar. She sighed. Agreed. Lord Marcus said, "I have no desires like my business acquaintance Tylan. You are quite lovely, but a little old for my personal taste. I would make the same bet only with your little guard here, but unfortunately, he will be very dead. My pleasures may run a little dark, but not even I would go down the path of necrophilia. I tell you what, I will match your own bet. If your man dies, I will take your two largest wagons and all they carry, with the exception of 10 items which either will be allowed to remove after the winner is agreed." Mistress Miranda pondered on the offer for a couple of breaths. 5 items can be taken out, but only single items. No crates filled with items or bags filled with gems. 5 single items can be removed in total. Lord Marcus nodded his head once more. Agreed. They each shook hands and bid the others a good night. Meanwhile, the 2 personal guards looked at Cyrus, and Clang said, "We are going to gut you, boy, from neck to navel." Cyrus just gave his average shrug and said, "I was only trying to help you both connect with the secret needs that you obviously hold with one another. I just wish you would have had more opportunity to explore those desires." Clang reached out to grab at Cyrus, and the boy did not flinch a muscle as Service stopped his hand. "Tomorrow we will rip him in half." They walked away. Cyrus looked to Mistress Miranda and said, just in a loud enough voice to be heard, "I really hope they spend their last night together in each other's arms." Miranda could not help but laugh at that. "I am glad you find this so amusing. You had better win, since I have put my virtue on the line." Cyrus stopped and bowed to Miranda with his fist on his heart as Jarl had shown him. "It will be a pleasure to protect your honor, my lady. May I make one small request if I am able to survive this battle to the death?" Miranda stopped, eyeing the young man. Somehow she felt that he had designed this entire ordeal to ask this small request. She could feel the importance to him. "What would you ask?" Cyrus looked her in the eyes and said, "I wish you to teach me the ways of magic. I must learn these arts that you wield. A thing such as this does not exist in my village, and I would take this power if you would simply teach me." Miranda could see the longing in his eyes, the emotion in his speech. He was a very emotionally charged young man. She had felt the power in him before and knew that he had the ability to learn. This is not a simple thing. It takes years of study to learn the basics of this art. It takes years more of meditation trying to understand the intricacies of how the universe operates. There is also a great cost to wielding such power. But if you survive and win the battle tomorrow, I will take you in as an apprentice once your month of servitude is complete." "I understand, and I thank my mistress for accepting my request." Cyrus was cheering inside his head. This was his opportunity to learn a great skill. He knew that once he had the basics understood, he could get Queen to unlock his abilities much faster than Miranda knows is possible. "I have a request for you as well," Miranda said as she walked past the different wagons. She stopped and turned to Cyrus in all seriousness. "You have to change your wardrobe. You look ridiculous, and not only do I not want you looking like that while you represent me in martial combat, I won't be able to train you while you still look like an imbecile from some unknown village." Cyrus looked down at his ancient boots that did not match, and the holes he had walked in them over the last few weeks. "I will look more fit for the part tomorrow. That is a promise." They continued their walk to Miranda's wagon in silence, and once she was inside, Cyrus continued on to do his rounds and watch for any dangers that may be lurking behind the tall grasses all around them. He had paid close attention to some of the things the guards had worn during the rest of the day. He had spoken with Jarl about different armors that may be suited for his fighting style. He did not mention anything about the blood feud the next day at noon. He did not want Jarl to be concerned with something that he saw as trivial. He didn't know where his inner confidence was coming from, but he simply knew beyond doubt that those two brutes could not come close to striking him. As the inner shell closed around the sun and darkness began to settle in the area, Cyrus walked behind the caravan far enough to complete his work unseen. He had gone over several designs with Queen's help and was ready to concentrate on his new professional appearance. He shed all his clothes and sat on a patch of grass in the darkness. Cyrus started with something that Queen referred to as underwear, then went on from there. Piece by piece he replaced his worn clothes by using his skill of minor creation. Between Queen's insight and the conversations that he had with Jarl, he was able to create a spectacular set of cloth-like armor that was flexible, yet as tough as steel. They all had a bluish-black sheen that repelled any type of dirt and would stay dry in the rain. He needed his arms to be protected, but he did not want any material that would impede his movements. He also needed a cowl that would not draw attention to his Time Warrior spectacles. He designed a sleeveless hoodie with wrist wraps that went all the way up his arm just past his elbow. He wore tight-fitting pants made of the same carbon fiber nanomaterial of the entire outfit. He added fingerless gloves that had a slightly sticky grip that would allow him a more stable hold on his weapons. All in all, when he was finished, he wore the entire ensemble with the cowl of the hoodie pulled down. He could see perfectly in the dark with his spectacles, and no one could tell he had them on. He felt much better about himself knowing that he no longer looked like the ignorant village boy that he once was. He stood up in the middle of the road and pulled his twin shining crescent moon blades. They contrasted against the darkness that was his shroud, and he became the walking embodiment of the messenger of death. Thank you for listening to Fate Weaver by Elias T. Least. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for exclusive original works from this author. All donations and proceeds from this work go directly to him. Cash App $EliasLeast. Copyright 2023.